Hey, Kevin Lawrence here, and I am here today with Brett Abram from the Lawrence & Co. team. Brett is one of our awesome advisors that has a wealth of experience that I benefit from personally on a regular basis, in addition to our clients. Brett, you have an incredible amount of wisdom. Anyway, so Brett, thank you for doing this interview, and how's it going for you today?
It's going great as always. Like to be able to talk about the work that we do and share a little bit of insights if it's there. But yeah, no, things are good. Things are very good.
Awesome. And for those of you might not know, but and Brett, we have a philosophy in the firm about thriving at our work and having a great life too. And Brett's down in the U.S. near where his son is going to college and playing baseball, so that he can go and see his son right now. So
Yeah,
mixing a high quality life amongst the work is part of what we're about, and you definitely live that.
yeah. That's I think that's one of the great things about the work that we do and the clients that we work with is the ability to be able to mix and work with that and still keep the flexibility around life, which is that real important component for me. So yeah, so looking looking at always trying to keep things nice and loose on that front.
Yep. Yep, same for me. Awesome, which is easier said than done.
Yeah,
So going back and for you and your history, where did you grow up and spend those early years of your life?
yeah. The interesting thing is I grew up on a farm, and I was on a farm till about in around age 16, and we had it was a full working farm. We had uh, cattle, we had horses, then we had rabbits. We were a really large rabbit operation, and then eventually pigs. So
Wow.
did all the farmhand stuff. Got really, sort of physical, work, and then also the ability to just fix things and on the fly. So I think my problem solving ability pretty soon.
It's pretty amazing when you learn how to fix physical things. How I often in my brain, I grew up learning how to do a lot of things like that. And that kind of puts some wiring in my brain that helps me fix business problems as well. It's almost like the breaking down of a mechanical issue is almost like breaking down of a business problem.
Yeah, I think there's so many similarities for me, and I mean it put an original interest for me in engineering, which is what I thought my
Mm.
original because of that fixing things, figuring out things, sorting things out, problem solving. And it turns out all of that translated into the work that I actually do. It all maps so beautifully.
Yeah, it does. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, grew up on a farm, lots of great experiences from that. What did your first career end up being?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I spent 2 years as an usher in a theater, which was probably a good job in high
Really?
school. Yeah, watched a ton of movies, free popcorn, things like that. But my sort of actual career would have been retail. So I wound up in retail management for about 5 years, in between schooling and things like that. And I still tell people today that that's such a good foundation for anything because I learned so much about customer service,
Mm.
on the fly, people management as well too, day-to-day people management, like managing high school students and part-time people and shifts and all that stuff that goes with it. And then the retail environment itself. It's fast, it's slow, and it's such a huge employer. But yet people don't necessarily think of it as a career. But I really give thanks that that was my foundation to spend about 5 years on the retail management side.
Awesome. That would have been very fascinating. And where did you go from there? Retail management led you to what next?
Yeah, so that led me to understand a little bit more about what I really enjoyed, which was the people side
Mm.
of it, people developments. Through that process, they were sending people sort of, partway through sending people to my location to say, hey, can you train this person, get them ready for store
Oh.
management? I really thoroughly enjoyed.
Mm.
And so that then said, hey, I think I'm going to go back to school now because I got a bit more clarification. And that's where I then focused on human resources. And then doing that and then coming out of there into, right into the human resources field after that was sort of where my career path then sort of, focused.
Right. And from there up until you started working with us, that was what you did, human resources. And kind of, at the end of your career, what was your role in human resources like? How would you describe that?
spent just about 25 years and ended up as the Vice President of Human Resources for Sleep Country Canada. Such a great career path for myself. I look back at it because I spent time in publishing, I spent time in retail, I spent time in CBC broadcasting, so a combination of government and media. I spent some time in manufacturing and then back into retail with a real focus on I think mid-size organizations. I mean, Hudson Bay Company was quite large, but a lot of the other
Yeah.
ones were mid-size, but always in the human resources and an opportunity to work in all the fields of human resources. So from labor relations to benefits to comp to recruitment to org development, all those facets, which I'm so grateful for, really, ultimately led me to the point where I was ready to, say what was next, which was, consulting, that had such a nice transition for me.
It does. Yeah. And I know from working with you and you working with our clients, is those experiences in all those different areas over the years makes it very easy for you to go into complex situations from an HR perspective and sort it out. I can almost picture you using the farm, fixing the machinery type thinking in a way you go and solve these complex, sometimes very emotional problems in companies.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair statement. That ability to kind of step back, see something objectively, see the patterns that are in the what might be the chaos, and be able to from that perspective, which has always been something that's just come easily to me. Which and then I spent time honing it, but that really became I think ultimately for me became what I most enjoyed about human resources, working with people, helping them find the solution in the chaos, because that's usually when people arrived at my door was like, my world's kind of falling apart.
Yeah.
Can you help me figure out what we need to do, whether it was just an individual or a team or a division, any of those different areas. So like, okay, well, let's break it down, sort it out, and go from there.
Yeah, and that's what I see you do on a regular basis with our clients and sometimes with me. You're a great resource for that because you're calm and clear, and then you just start to get down to the root of it. Again, I'm going back to your story about the farm. It really resonates having that piece of information, which was new to me. Cool. So you kind of touched on it, but like today in this next stage of your career, what is it that excites you to most to get out of bed in the day and in the morning and do what you do?
Yeah. When it comes to work, it is helping people get that moment of clarity. So whether I'm working with coaching them or I'm working with a team, and that when they hit that moment of clarity and they're like, oh, okay, I can see a path forward, I think has always been the real satisfying moment for me, and that's what I really enjoy seeing happen, because I've been there, I've been on the other side, I've been the executive or the manager who's kind of like, I just don't know how I'm going to get through this path. And so often the path is there, and as you know, the path is there. Different clients, they just need a little bit of perspective, a few tough questions, and a little bit of wisdom and experience, and usually between that mixture, there's usually a moment of like, okay, I think I get it now, I got it. And then you can see the relief on the face, at that point. And that might not be something that's going to be solved next week. We might be talking about 6 months or a year plan, but now it's like, okay, I've got a plan. I see, I can see what I can work toward.
They can see that there is a pathway to get there, and they have faith that it's possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can't see it because there's that whole metaphor where we can't see the forest for the trees. We all get lost in it.
Yeah, you're embedded in it, which I appreciate. I've been there. You're embedded in it, whether it's overwhelmed or emotional, whatever it is, right? And then it's that ability to kind of ask some poignant questions and apply a little bit of experience and help them find that first step or two.
Yeah, I agree. So thinking of like you helping others, like who has had the biggest influence on you and your leadership? We almost helping you to find your own moments of clarity to take the concept you're talking about.
There's a who and a what to that question. The who was a director of labor relations at Hudson Bay Company that I worked for, and he mentored me in terms of understanding labor relations, and he gave me such a unique perspective, because in the world of labor relations, patience, precision, um, uh, reading the room,
Yeah.
listening, like stop talking and listening are so critical. And he was so good at ingraining these skills in me in terms of taking me from someone who had not been at at the table negotiating contracts to by the end, I was the lead on the contract. So I was in set up to lead the negotiations on multiple different contracts. And that experience really honed, my
Mm,
ability to effectively listen to a group that generally wasn't happy with you. So it's one thing to have a client that's frustrated, but if you think about a client that's frustrated and just doesn't like as a
yeah.
combination. So how do you work through that, not take their reactions personally, and help find a solution to an emotionally charged scenario through effective listening. So he really helped guide me in that process, and really he really helped me mature from that piece. And the second part was the what was when I went through my coaching training, and
Mm,
that really brought some strong revelations about leadership and style of leadership, because as I learned about how to be an effective coach and engage with people as a coach, that taught me about how to be a leader. So I gone through the coaching education certification when I was still in my corporate role. And uh, coming back out of that, there were so many things I was able to put in place in my leadership style that made a huge difference. So now
mm,
when I work with leaders, and especially human resources leaders, I often talk to them about, like, have you considered going and getting certification in coaching just for yourself? You don't necessarily have to be thinking about a world of going to be a coach or a consultant.
mm,
That skill set, that ability to ask effective questions, how you listen, how you probe, um, uh, your ability to stay objective through the process, staying in the problem longer, and how to engage through that. Really, incredible. So, the who and the what really, in real combination. But I have been so fortunate to have such fantastic leaders and people to work with, including right up to Lawrence and Company now, that I continue to learn things, refine approaches, different tactics and things like that. So that's it continues to be a lifelong journey for me in terms of.
mm. Yeah, I love that. It's the who and the what, because that in that environment of the coach training, yeah, it shifts your perspective. And I think, as you said for HR leaders, I think coach training is basically, it's almost the highest level of leadership
I
in terms
think
of
so.
the behavior of leadership, in terms of assuming people can find their own way and asking the right questions and leaving space for them. And yeah, that's a great perspective. So you kind of touched on the fact that in your career you started, you did coach training and such. What in the end made you decide that I am going to go and do this advising and coaching, as the next phase of your career? What made you decide to do that?
Oh, I don't know what the exact trigger was. It had always been part of my. It always, at a certain point, it had always become part of my career path. I think the aspect was that I'd reached the level that where I really wanted to at the corporate level, lots of success. I really enjoyed it. And then it was what was next, right? And for me, it was, I want to take all of this information, knowledge, and experience I've got and be able to give back in some ways. So I've always enjoyed, how I can mentor and encourage, especially, young human resources leaders, but also that aspect of, like, I benefited from really great people over my career who've been able to share wisdom and experience. And so that opportunity, and I felt that I was sort of at that point in my career where retirement was too soon, like a full on retirement. So it was always going to be semi retirement for me. And as we talked about at the beginning, the ability to create that work, self, and life combination of travel and work, so all of those components really came together. And COVID was just such an interesting trigger point in terms of what was going to be next. And yeah, the timing worked out really well for me to make that transition.
Mm.
um,
And,
well,
and although it was a transition in terms of where you did your work, I think that coach has been within you for a long time. Like it's extremely natural for you. When I first met you, very natural for you.
yeah, absolutely. That developed, I want to say, probably 15
Yeah.
17 years ago. People were just coming to me, and I just noticed that, hey, people are coming to me, so I must be doing something right along these lines. And then I started to refine it and get better at it. Then the certification, and then being very active, like inside the corporate environment, identifying as I'm also a key coach. So working with executive members on the team. So as much as I was supporting them as the head of human resources, I was also a coach for many of them, and just thoroughly enjoying that role, feeling like I, benefit to the organization, really, in a different way. There was all the business stuff that
Sure.
needed to be, the strategy and execution that needed to happen, and really, augmenting that with that individual support for these executives. Because as you know, they're on their own, right? They're
Yeah.
selves, they're ones, they're individual operators, in a team, but they're by themselves, so they have the same people to talk to or bounce things off of.
Yeah. And when you get in big challenges, having someone you can bounce things off of who isn't your boss or, your direct manager, it creates a different kind of a conversation. And it's, wonderful.
Yeah.
So in the work that you do, and you do lots of different work around HR strategy, HR structure, developing, up and coming leaders and executives, which, and going in and assessing challenging situations. There's lots of different stuff that you do with our clients, and they're grateful for, and I'm grateful for. But what would you say is your sweet spot, the place where you just thrive in your role as an advisor?
I think it's the um I think it's the I got this problem and I don't know how to untangle it. So individual person who might need coaching, who's like, I'm just overwhelmed. I really don't know where to start. Great. Okay. I've got some thoughts and pieces that we can break things down and sort of get you organized, right? Or meeting with a couple owners for an organization who say, we're doing great, but we don't know what that next step is in the organization, and we just don't know where to go and where to start. Okay, well, let's kind of untangle this and create a path. So I find it repeating itself, or it's an emerging leader who's like, their manager said, "Can you work with them? They're great. They're full of energy, but they're all over the place." It's like, okay, well then let's have a chat with them, and then let's create a path. So as I talk here, I think it's ultimately that sweet spot is identifying the opportunity and then creating the path, co-creating the path. I think is probably the way I would put it.
There's the name, which is moment of clarity, and then there's the path to go move forward.
Yeah,
that could actually that you've done some really challenging things you've dug into for clients and sensitive things, and it's actually that absolute clarity, and here's a path.
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah, cool. And the kind of clients you like to work with, and we have, it's not, is there any particular attributes of the clients or the types of, because you can go and do that work anywhere, but there's certain environments that you like to do that most in.
Yeah, I really enjoy the clients that we tend to wind up interacting with, which are, small to medium sized organizations who are curious and energetic and want to, make that next step and be best. And I find that they're not trying to prove anything. Like when they talk to me or they talk to us, they're not trying to establish like, hey, I'm already really established, I know what I'm doing. They're like, hey, I see lots of opportunity for us, but I don't know what I don't know, and I want to know what the next step is. And so that to me is really fulfilling because they're curious, they ask questions, they're open to thoughts and ideas, and then they're action oriented because they are like, okay, got it, and now I'm prepared to
Let's
take
go.
the next go. We've got the steps, we've got a path.
Yeah, I'm the same with you. Like for me, it's, and you're describing in many ways like what Jim Collins would talk about was like a level 5 leader. They're very driven, and they're very humble and wanting to always learn and get better. And they've accepted that they need to constantly learn and get better, but that's where they show up from. And then you're not dealing with a lot of facades and a lot of other stuff. They just sincerely want to become more effective.
Yeah, they're like, I've got a few ideas, but I know I don't know everything, and I could really use your experience here, and let's see if we can figure out what's next.
Well, interesting. That also relates to the people who get the most value from the work that we do.
think
People
so,
that
yeah.
think they've got it all figured out, they're closed, and they can't get a lot of. We can't actually help a lot or create a lot of value because
Yeah.
they're not, because sometimes it's even when you facilitated my 360 with me, right, went through my results, it's not fun, and but you need to, and you shared an insight with me which was very impactful, and I got it, like I got my moment of clarity. It was very simple, but I wanted it. And
Yeah.
it's like there's a saying that if someone doesn't want the ideas, it'll be like water off a duck's back, and that's not
Yeah.
good for them nor us.
No, and to me that, and from time to time we meet those folks and it's like the timing's just not right, which I
Yes, they're
respect.
not. Today's not either they're not ready, or maybe we're not the right person for them. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, you're right. It's everyone's got a time. Cool. So in the work that you do, and it's an if, but if you had a favorite tool or a most powerful tool that you like to use with clients, is there one or two, or what? Yeah, is there something that is your go-to or your one of your more powerful ones?
Yeah. So if I'm working with, say I'm working with an organization on something, to me, it's the discovery tool where I'm going to ask a lot of questions about what you're doing and why you're doing things. So, if we take an example around org design, I've got a, really good discovery tool that just asks a lot of questions about, okay, here's how you are, but how do you actually function? And then let's just break it down about why that is the way it is, and challenge the maybe the hierarchical or the historical thinking, to see if it makes sense. And I find those discovery sessions, I'm always like curious about like what's going to come out of them, what's going to happen, and then by the end, you can already start to see some patterns in thinking, and we might start and we spend 2 or 2.5 hours, and then by the end you can start to see the hints of like, hey, I think I know where this is going. So that that process, I don't consider it complicated. It's more about being thoughtful and asking the questions. Is really great with individuals, especially on the coaching side. We use the one-page personal plan, and it works every time. And the amount of people that are like, this is so good, like this, that again, it's a discovery process, right? It's like, okay, how did your time go? How was it, right? How was the last year? What is your plan? What is your master plan? What's the quarter plan, right? Like, what are you thinking? So I think that this process of discovery, is so critical. Outside of that, there are a lot of other, various mechanisms, tools that I apply. I often talk about the ladder of inference, as a good way for people to reflect and think upon, um, why they do what they do, because it really demonstrates, you see and hear something, and then you tell yourself a story about that, what you saw and heard, and then you take action, right? And the example I love to give is you're driving along and someone cuts you off, and then we react to them, and we tell ourselves a story about that person,
Yep.
and then we take action with, various sign languages. And when people see this tool to help them understand reactions they're having with other people or teams or individuals, it's a reminder about the story we tell ourselves about other people and whether or not it's accurate or not. So you go back to the car
Yep.
example and said, hey, I hope you get there safely and without incident. It's a mind shift, it's a redirect, reframe that is tough to do, but when people experiment with it, you start to understand the opportunity to check the validity of your stories with whatever you're interacting with.
Yep. Yeah, it's a great reminder because we instantly react with a story and we act as if it's true, and a huge portion of the time it's not. There's a lot of assumptions, and we're making a lot of bridges that don't exist.
Yeah, and it applies whether it's individual one-on-one or it's with teams and interactions or assumptions you're making about the business. Like there's just so
Or
many.
about yourself, with yourself. Sometimes our
Yeah,
brain will do that to ourselves.
absolutely.
Yeah,
We tell ourselves terrible stories about ourselves or really great ones, right? It's
it's
like creativity.
true. It is true. So I heard three tools. I heard ladder of inference. I heard the master plan from your Oxygen Mask First. And then I heard a big stack of questions.
Yeah.
And as I was listening to you, Brett, the root I heard from them all is a whole bunch of questions that gets people to think about things.
Yeah.
That seems
I
to
think
be
that's
even,
ultimately it.
yeah, yeah, that's part of your, and I would sort of a stack of questions that leads to a moment of clarity that can help them find a path forward.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's so good. Awesome. So, you mentioned your oxygen mask first tool master plan at the back of it, but in there we talk about resilience rituals.
Yeah.
And we know that sometimes it gets really challenging and stressful and we got to be ourselves. Like, what are your rituals, your resilience rituals you do to be and stay at your best?
Yeah, for me, it's physical activity. It's important for me. So whether that's yoga or working out, weightlifting has always been a part of my regimen for a long time. I played football in high school through university, so all that dynamic stayed with me. Lots of reading. So whether it's pleasure reading or business reading, sometimes the books are exciting, sometimes they're not, but still picking up nuggets here and there. And then as I mentioned, the travel aspect, and for me, that I've been able to keep that nice, the passion ratios around work, self, and life right where I want them to be, and that has become so critical. And I find, especially now, further into my life and my career, that is requires additional focus, but it has a higher priority in terms of how well I maintain myself. So the resilience around that really worked because I noticed, it makes a big difference for the energy I have when I do bring it to, to work with the clients or the individuals.
Yeah, I noticed in my 50s that the resilience rituals have a much bigger impact than they might have in their 30s. In the 30s, you could just kind of roll with it, especially early 30s, and now it's like I need to take good care of myself to be at my best, to be my sharpest.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the gray-haired wisdom parts.
Yes, yeah, and a few experiences along the way. Cool,
Yeah.
awesome. So, last question to ask you is over your career, you have given and received a lot of advice, but sometimes there's certain pieces that just stick with you and resonate with you, and you remind yourself of it. You probably repeat it to others. Can you think of one or two pieces of the best advice you've ever received?
Yeah, there's one that sticks with me that I still share with people today, and it's the foundation of 80% is good enough. So the background behind that is when I was working in manufacturing, the general manager that I worked for, engineer by trade, really, really sharp individual. And I had just come out of the Hudson Bay Company, primarily focused on labor relations. So I was very precision oriented, dare I say, almost on sort of a perfectionist level, and not the healthy perfectionist level. As I eventually, you learn about perfectionism has a place, but it can also be overdone.
Yep.
And so trying to get things, finished up, handing over projects to him and things like that. And he sat me down and he said, Brett, I'm going to give you a bit of advice here. Sometimes 80% is good enough. And what I mean by that is get it to 80% and then go, and the rest will take care of itself, because you're never going to get 100%. You're spending too much time and energy trying to get almost before you're handing it over, before you're launching. And I remember when he said it to me, it shocked me, it pushed me back, but it became very powerful for me. And my ability that I later got a lot of feedback on, my ability to get things done, to move things along, to make it happen, I really attribute to that, because I'm like, okay, I think we've got all the nuts and bolts here. We've got the guts. Let's get moving. The rest of it we can refine along the way, because it is important stuff, but it doesn't need to be done now. And we may benefit from a little bit down the road of seeing if there's some additional tweaks to it. So it was something with all of my staff that I did. And I know that even with a few of our colleagues here, and I've said that, I feel like Kristen and I were talking about something the other day, and about 80% is good enough, and then let's go, because I think we've got it there. And the clients appreciate that, because it's like, it's not like, no, I need to keep fussing and fiddling with it. They're like, I think we're good, right? As long as we've got the guts and the key pieces, let's get moving on.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know for myself, I often have that philosophy, but there's certain things I get stuck on where I push beyond 80% and don't need to. Yeah. I think we all have certain things that we flow with, and others that I call it getting tight around. And
yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like I said, it was such a good piece of advice. It stuck with me. It still resonates. I can still see myself sitting in his office when he told me it, and me trying to process it. But the impact that it had on me was huge, and my career and my approach to things.
Isn't it amazing how one piece of advice like that, and that person may or may not know the impact that it had on you, but one piece of advice, one phrase, in one moment can have such an impact. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful. Brett, thank you for sharing your perspectives and a bit about yourself. I mean, we do a lot of great work together, and our clients are thrilled to get to work with you, as am I, and you're a great resource for myself as well. So thank you for all the great things that you do and for sharing a bit more about yourself today.
All right. Well, thanks for the opportunity to pick my brain and my background a little bit. I appreciate it, and then looking forward to seeing what the future brings.
Absolutely. Yeah, me too. Brett, the farmer, who likes to ask a lot of questions so people get a moment of clarity and then find their own path forward. That's
I like
awesome.
it.
All right. See you soon.
See you soon.